I'm Samantha Reynolds, 34, standing in the corner office of my downtown headquarters. 5 years ago, my ex-husband Richard looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll never survive without me." Today, my company is valued at 8 figures. The journey from his trophy wife to CEO wasn't easy. There were moments I nearly believed him. But that's the thing about being underestimated, it creates the perfect opportunity to prove everyone wrong. Before I take you through my journey from heartbreak to CEO, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to see more stories of resilience just like mine. I grew up solidly middle class in Minneapolis, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. My parents valued education above all else, so I worked hard and earned a scholarship to Northwestern, graduating with a degree in marketing. After college, I landed a job at a boutique advertising agency in Chicago. The work was creative and challenging. I was building a reputation for innovative campaigns and was on track for a promotion by my mid-20s. That's when I met Richard. He was 38, impossibly handsome in his tailored suits, and already established as one of the city's most successful real estate developers. We met at a charity gala where my agency had donated services. I was there representing our work, and Richard was a major donor. He approached me at the bar with a confidence I found magnetic. "Your agency's campaign is the only interesting thing about this event," he said, offering me a glass of champagne. "Want to discuss it somewhere with better food?" That night turned into a whirlwind romance that swept me off my feet. Richard's world was nothing like mine: private jets to New York for dinner, weekends in his Lake Michigan estate, front row seats at exclusive events. His generosity seemed boundless. He sent elaborate flower arrangements to my office, surprised me with designer gifts, and took me to restaurants where the chef would come out personally to greet him. "You deserve the best of everything," Richard would say, brushing aside my protests when he replaced my sensible Honda with a Mercedes on our third-month anniversary. 8 months after we met, Richard proposed during a sunset helicopter tour over the city. The ring was flawless, the moment perfect. I said yes without hesitation. What woman wouldn't? He represented everything I thought I wanted: success, sophistication, security. The wedding was featured in Chicago Magazine, a winter wonderland affair at the historic Drake Hotel with 300 guests, many of whom I'd never met. They were Richard's business associates, socialites, and political connections. My side was noticeably smaller, just family and a handful of close friends from college and work. The early days of marriage were intoxicating. We honeymooned for 3 weeks, island hopping through the Mediterranean on a private yacht. When we returned, Richard suggested I take a break from work. "You've been working since college," he said, massaging my shoulders as we lounged in our penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. "Why not enjoy life for a while? You don't need that agency salary." It made sense at the time. Richard's business was booming, and he had more than enough to support us both. Plus, there were always charity boards needing members, social events to attend, and our homes to decorate. I handed in my resignation, promising my mentors I'd be back after taking some time to explore other opportunities. But those opportunities never materialized. Instead, I slipped into the role of Mrs. Richard Reynolds, hostess, decorator, and perfect +1. I organized dinner parties for his business associates, redecorated our 3 homes, and maintained the flawless appearance expected of a developer's wife. "You have such an eye for design," Richard would praise as I selected art for our Aspen home. "You're much better at this than you ever were at writing ad copy." I didn't notice how my world was shrinking. First, it was subtle changes, Richard suggesting my college friends were a bit provincial after they visited. Then came the increasing control over our finances. Though we lived luxuriously, I had no access to our main accounts. "Why would you need it?" Richard would laugh when I brought it up. "Just use the credit cards. That's easier for tax purposes." My personal credit card had a generous limit, but every purchase was visible to Richard, who occasionally questioned my spending with a teasing but critical tone. "Another dress, sweetheart? Don't you have something similar already?" 3 years into our marriage, I felt a growing emptiness despite our material wealth. My days were filled with yoga classes, lunch dates with other executives' wives, and endless charity functions. My marketing skills were relegated to helping Richard's friends with occasional little projects that never led to real opportunities. One evening, after too many glasses of wine with my one genuine friend from our social circle, Madison Clark, I confessed my restlessness. "I'm thinking of starting something," I told her, voice lowered though we were alone on her terrace. "An online boutique, curating fashion from independent designers. Something that gives back to women artisans." Madison's eyes lit up. "Sam, that's brilliant. You'd be amazing at that." Her enthusiasm gave me courage to mention it to Richard that weekend. I prepared a simple business plan and preliminary budget. His reaction was immediate. "A boutique? That's adorable, sweetheart." He barely looked at my carefully prepared presentation. "If you're bored, why not join another charity board? The Children's Hospital is looking for members." "I want to create something of my own," I pressed. "I could start small, use my own money." Richard's smile never reached his eyes. "Your own money? Samantha, you don't have your own money. Everything we have is because of my business acumen. This sounds like a cute hobby, but leave the real business to me." His words stung, but I didn't push back. Instead, I tucked my business plan into a drawer and tried to ignore the growing pit in my stomach. That night, Richard brought home an expensive necklace, his typical response whenever I showed signs of discontent. "You work too hard on these little projects," he said, fastening the diamonds around my neck. "Relax and enjoy our life. Not everyone gets to live like this." I smiled and thanked him, but something had shifted inside me. For the first time, I wondered if the golden cage Richard had built was worth the price of my independence. Still, I continued playing my part, burying my ambitions beneath designer clothes and charity galas. The tension between us grew, though we both pretended not to notice it. In retrospect, I should have seen the signs of trouble much earlier. Richard's late nights at the office became more frequent. He started taking business trips without inviting me along, contrary to our early marriage when I accompanied him everywhere. His phone was increasingly guarded, and he would step away to take calls. I told myself I was being paranoid. Richard had built an empire, of course, he needed to work hard to maintain it. My job was to support him, not question him. At least, that's what I'd come to believe. The revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday. Richard was in New York for business, and I was organizing his home office as a surprise. His primary laptop was with him, but his backup was still in the safe. I knew the combination, one of the few financial details Richard had shared with me, just in case something happened to him. I hadn't planned to look through his emails. But when I opened his laptop to update some personal photos, a notification popped up. A message from Jessica Winters, wife of Robert Winters, Richard's business partner and our frequent dinner guest. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Same hotel as last time? Make sure Samantha doesn't suspect anything. Robert is clueless as always." My hands trembled as I clicked on the message thread. What unfolded was months of correspondence, explicit photos, and detailed plans of their rendezvous during Richard's business trips. Some messages even mocked me directly. "She's so naive, planning charity events while we're together. Almost makes me feel bad for her." Almost. Richard's responses were worse. "Samantha serves her purpose. She's a perfect hostess and looks good on my arm. But you, Jessica, you understand me." I sat motionless in his leather office chair for hours, reading through message after message. The affair had been going on for at least a year. There were hotel receipts, dinner reservations, even a weekend trip to his Aspen home, supposedly closed for renovations when I had wanted to visit. When Richard called that evening for our usual check-in, I somehow managed to sound normal. I needed time to process, to plan. That night, I didn't sleep at all. When he returned 2 days later, I was waiting in the living room, printed copies of selected emails spread on the coffee table. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. You tell me, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane raging inside me. Richard glanced at the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to anger in seconds. You went through my private emails? That's a violation of my privacy, Samantha. His attempt to flip the situation made my blood boil. And sleeping with Robert's wife while lying to my face for a year isn't a violation of our marriage? Richard loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch, his movements deliberate and calm. It's just business and pleasure, Samantha. Don't be so provincial. In our circles, these things happen. Our circles? You mean your circles? The ones where wives are decorative objects and cheating is acceptable? He sat opposite me, swirling his drink. You're overreacting. Jessica and I have a physical connection, but you're my wife. You get all the benefits of this lifestyle. Most women would be grateful. Grateful? My voice cracked. For being lied to and humiliated? You knew who I was when you married me. Did you really expect a man in my position to be satisfied with just one woman? Grow up, Samantha. Look at everything I've given you. I stared at this stranger wearing my husband's face. How had I never seen this coldness before? I want to go to marriage counseling, I said finally. If this marriage means anything to you, we need professional help. Richard laughed, actually laughed. Counseling is for weak men who can't manage their households. But fine, if it will end this tedious conversation, I'll go to a session or two. He agreed too easily, which should have been my second warning. Richard scheduled sessions with a therapist who, I later discovered, was a golf buddy of his. We attended 3 appointments where Richard performed perfectly, admitting to errors in judgment and promising to recommit to our marriage. Meanwhile, a quick search on my phone during a bathroom break at our 3rd session revealed he was still texting Jessica. He had simply gotten more careful. After that discovery, I reached out to Madison, the one friend Richard hadn't managed to alienate. Over lunch in a small cafe where we wouldn't be recognized, I confided everything. Sam, this isn't just cheating, Madison said, reaching for my hand. The way he's twisting everything, making you doubt yourself, it's gaslighting. And controlling all the money? That's financial abuse. Financial abuse? The term was new to me. But we're wealthy. I have credit cards. Cards he monitors and can cancel anytime, Madison pointed out. Do you have access to cash? Accounts in your name? Do you even know what you're worth as a couple? I didn't. And that realization sent a chill through me. That evening, while Richard attended a business dinner, with Jessica, no doubt, I began investigating our finances. His office safe contained more than just his laptop. There were financial statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios I'd never seen before. What I discovered shocked me. Richard's business was worth considerably more than he'd ever indicated. There were properties in multiple countries, offshore accounts, and investment vehicles with my name on them, presumably for tax purposes, that I'd never been informed about. Most disturbing was a transfer record showing millions moving to accounts in the Cayman Islands over the past year, around the time his affair with Jessica began. Was he preparing to leave me? Planning to hide assets before a divorce? The next morning, I called Emma Bennett, a divorce attorney Madison recommended. I met her at her office, bringing copies of everything I'd found. You've done well gathering evidence, Emma said after reviewing my documents. But we need to move quickly. Men like Richard have teams of lawyers who specialize in hiding assets during divorces. I haven't decided on divorce yet, I said, still clinging to the idea that we might salvage something. Emma gave me a sympathetic but firm look. Mrs. Reynolds, from what you've shown me, your husband is actively moving assets offshore, having an affair with his business partner's wife, and has isolated you from friends, family, and financial independence. Whatever you decide, you need to protect yourself. She was right. Over the next few weeks, I quietly gathered more documentation, made copies of everything important, and secured them both with Emma and in a safe deposit box Richard knew nothing about. I withdrew small amounts of cash from my household account, careful not to trigger any alerts. I researched our properties and investments, creating a comprehensive picture of our marital assets. All while playing the role of oblivious, forgiving wife. 3 months after discovering the affair, Richard announced he needed to take an extended business trip to Dubai. It's a major development opportunity, he explained over dinner. I'll be gone for at least 2 weeks. Dubai in the summer? I questioned, keeping my tone light. It must be an amazing opportunity to go during the hottest season. Richard barely looked up from his phone. The timing is critical for the investors. That night, while he packed, I noticed him selecting his most expensive watches and cufflinks, items he typically left home during actual business trips due to security concerns. When he stepped out to take a call, I quickly checked his travel itinerary on his iPad. He wasn't going to Dubai. His reservations were for a villa in Santorini, Greece. And he had a second ticket booked, for Jessica Winters. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. A quick social media search revealed that Robert Winters was scheduled to speak at a conference in Tokyo during those same dates. Richard and Jessica had planned a 2-week romantic getaway while her husband was on another continent. Something in me snapped. All the careful planning, the quiet evidence gathering, the strategic patience Emma had counseled, it evaporated in the heat of my rage. This wasn't just an affair, it was a complete dismantling of 2 marriages with calculated precision. I waited until morning, when Richard was finishing his packing. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him fold his designer shirts with meticulous care. "How's the weather in Santorini this time of year?" I asked calmly. Richard froze, then slowly turned to face me. "What are you talking about?" "Your reservation at the Azure Villas. The one you booked for you and Jessica while Robert is in Tokyo. I'm just wondering if you packed enough sunscreen." His face transformed before my eyes. The charming, successful man I married vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "You've been spying on me?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "No, Richard. I've been waking up." He closed his suitcase with deliberate calm. "This conversation is pointless. We can discuss this when I return if you insist on making drama." "There won't be anything to discuss when you return. I want a divorce." Richard laughed, that same dismissive laugh from when I'd confronted him about the affair. "Don't be ridiculous. You're upset, but you'll calm down. I've already spoken to an attorney." That got his attention. His eyes narrowed. "You've what?" "Emma Bennett. Perhaps you've heard of her? She specializes in high-net-worth divorces." Richard's charm offensive activated instantly. He crossed the room and tried to take my hands. "Samantha, sweetheart, you're overreacting. Every marriage has rough patches. Think about what you'd be giving up." I stepped back. I already know exactly what I'd be giving up. And what I'd be gaining. His expression darkened. "You've signed a prenup. You'll get nothing. A prenup you violated with marital misconduct and hidden assets. Emma thinks it won't hold up in court." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You think you can take me on legally? I have an army of attorneys. You'll be buried in litigation for years." "Maybe. But Robert Winters might be interested in what I know. And the IRS might have questions about those Cayman accounts." It was a bluff. I had no concrete evidence of tax evasion, just suspicions. But Richard's face told me I'd hit a nerve. "You're nothing without me," he hissed, his mask completely gone now. "I made you. Before me, you were a nobody working a mediocre job. You think you can survive without my money? Without my connections? You'll come crawling back within a month. I'd rather be a nobody than your accessory." "You'll regret this," he warned, grabbing his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. Don't expect to stay in this apartment. Or have access to any of our accounts after today." "Our accounts? The ones I've never had access to anyway?" His smile was cold. You can't survive a week without my money, Samantha. You've forgotten what the real world is like. Within hours, his threats materialized. My credit cards were declined when I tried to buy lunch. The security staff at our building informed me the ownership of our apartment was in dispute and I couldn't enter without Richard's permission. By evening, I couldn't even access my email. Apparently, Richard owned the domain. Emma advised me to document everything. This kind of vindictive financial cutting off actually helps our case, she assured me. It demonstrates the financial control he's had throughout the marriage. That was small comfort as I stood on Madison's doorstep that night with just 2 hastily packed suitcases. I'd managed to grab some clothes, personal documents, and a few pieces of jewelry that had been gifts from my parents before being locked out. You can stay as long as you need, Madison insisted, showing me to her guest room. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, court filings, and devastating discoveries. Richard fought dirty, as promised. He froze every account, canceled every card, and even reported our car as stolen when I tried to use it. His legal team filed motions questioning my mental stability and alleging I had substance abuse issues. Most painfully, our social circle evaporated overnight. People who had hugged me at parties a week earlier now declined my calls. Charity boards sent polite emails asking for my resignation due to the current circumstances. Even some of Richard's business competitors, whom I thought might help me out of spite for him, wouldn't take meetings. Richard is threatening anyone who helps you, Madison explained after another friend canceled plans. He's telling people you had an affair, that you're unstable, that you tried to embezzle from his company. 6 weeks after filing for divorce, I hit rock bottom. I was sitting on the floor of Madison's guest room, surrounded by job rejection emails. Despite my marketing degree and early career success, I couldn't land even an interview. Richard's influence in Chicago's business community was too strong. The temporary support the court had ordered was barely enough to cover my legal fees, leaving nothing for rebuilding my life. My savings, the little I had managed to squirrel away, were dwindling rapidly. Richard's prediction echoed in my mind, you can't survive a week without my money. That night, while searching through my belongings for a pair of earrings I could sell, I found an old notebook. Inside was my business plan for the online boutique, complete with supplier contacts, marketing strategies, and financial projections. I had continued working on it secretly even after Richard dismissed the idea. Flipping through those pages, something stirred inside me. Not just determination, but clarity. Richard wanted me to fail, to prove him right. The best revenge wouldn't be taking his money, it would be creating my own. I'll show him who can survive, I whispered to myself, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. Finding an apartment with no income, no credit history, everything had been in Richard's name, and a pending divorce was nearly impossible. After 20 rejections, I finally secured a tiny studio in a building with no elevator and questionable plumbing, far from Chicago's glamorous Gold Coast where I'd lived with Richard. The contrast was stark, from a 4,000-square-foot penthouse to a 400-square-foot studio with a kitchenette and a futon that doubled as my bed and couch. My new rent consumed nearly half of the meager temporary support payments that actually made it through Richard's legal obstacles. Job hunting proved equally demoralizing. My resume showed a 5-year employment gap that screamed trophy wife, and Richard seemed to have poisoned the well at every marketing agency in the city. After 37 applications and only 3 interviews, all ending with vague regrets after checking references, I was desperate. I finally took a position at Nordstrom, working retail for just above minimum wage. The flexible hours were the only upside, allowing me to attend court hearings and meetings with Emma. The humiliation of being recognized by former social acquaintances while I rang up their purchases was simply part of my new reality. Samantha? My God, I hardly recognized you, exclaimed Melanie Hargrove, wife of Richard's golf buddy, as I folded her $600 sweater into tissue paper. Are you working here now? The pity in her eyes was unmistakable, along with the gleeful gossip she was mentally composing. Yes, I am, I replied with forced brightness. It's actually quite refreshing to be productive again. How brave, she managed, taking her shopping bag. I'll tell everyone how well you're doing. I knew exactly what she'd actually tell everyone. The story of my downfall was prime social currency in Richard's circles. Meanwhile, Richard made sure I saw his thriving post-separation life. Though I'd blocked him on social media, our mutual acquaintances made sure I saw the posts, Richard and Jessica on his yacht, at gallery openings, hosting the very charity events I'd previously organized. The divorce proceedings dragged painfully. Richard's legal team filed motion after motion, each requiring responses that drained my limited resources. They demanded financial disclosures I couldn't produce because I'd never had access to them, then claimed I was being uncooperative. He's trying to break you financially, Emma explained during one of our meetings. It's a common tactic with wealthy clients. They can afford to drag things out until the other party gives up out of exhaustion. 3 months into my new life, something unexpected happened at Nordstrom. A customer named Alyssa Harper struck up a conversation while I helped her select a dress for a conference. "You've got an incredible eye," she commented as I suggested accessories. "Do you have a background in fashion?" "Marketing, actually," I admitted. But fashion was always a passion. Alyssa, I learned, owned a small but successful boutique in Wicker Park. By the end of our conversation, she'd offered me part-time work with more flexible hours and slightly better pay than Nordstrom. "I need someone with marketing sense and style," she explained. "And you clearly have both." Working at Alyssa's boutique, Ember Collection, opened a new world to me. Unlike the corporate structure of Nordstrom, I was involved in every aspect of the business, from ordering inventory to social media management, visual merchandising to customer relationships. Alyssa became not just an employer but a mentor, teaching me the nuts and bolts of running a small fashion business. At night, in my tiny apartment, I revisited my boutique concept. The original plan had been high-end, reflecting the luxury world I'd inhabited with Richard. Now, with my new perspective, I reimagined it completely, a curated online shop focusing on affordable, ethically sourced pieces for women rebuilding their lives, just like me. I created an Instagram account, posting styling tips using my own limited wardrobe supplemented with thrift store finds. I was transparent about my circumstances, without directly mentioning Richard, sharing the challenges of rebuilding a professional wardrobe on a tight budget. To my surprise, people responded. Women facing similar life transitions, divorce, career changes, relocations, found resonance in my authenticity. My follower count grew steadily, reaching 5,000 within 2 months. Through Alyssa, I met James Wilson, a web developer who had built Ember Collection's online store. "Your concept has real potential," he said after I showed him my business plan over coffee. "But you'll need a proper e-commerce platform, not just Instagram." When I explained my financial situation, James offered a solution. "I need help marketing my services to other small businesses. What if we trade? I'll build your site at a reduced rate, and you help me create a marketing strategy for my freelance business." This barter arrangement gave me my first client as a marketing consultant, although I didn't recognize it as such at the time. I simply saw it as a way to get my website built affordably. James and I worked evenings and weekends, him coding while I created content and planned the site structure. With a growing Instagram following and a website under construction, I approached several small business lenders. All rejected me. My credit score had plummeted after Richard canceled our joint cards, I had minimal income, and my divorce created too much financial uncertainty. The final rejection letter arrived on the same day I received notice that Richard was contesting the preliminary asset division, again. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment, back against the wall, and allowed myself a solid hour of tears. The weight of it all, the humiliation, the financial strain, the endless legal battles, felt crushing. My phone rang, interrupting my breakdown. It was Emma. "Samantha, we've got movement. Richard has finally agreed to a settlement." I sat up straighter. "What's the catch?" "It's much less than we believe you're entitled to," she admitted. "But it would end the litigation immediately. You'd get a lump sum of $175,000, keep your personal items, and both parties walk away. It was a fraction of what a fair division of our marital assets would provide, especially given Richard's business growth during our marriage. But it would also end the financial bleeding of ongoing legal fees. Why now? I asked. Hard to say for certain, Emma replied. But there are rumors that one of Richard's development deals is in trouble. He might need to settle with you before those issues become public and affect the divorce proceedings. I thought about it overnight, weighing Emma's advice against my pride. The settlement was insulting compared to what I deserved, but it was also enough to potentially launch my business and secure modest housing. More importantly, it would free me from Richard's legal stranglehold. The next morning, I called Emma. I'll take it, but with one condition. I want the agreement finalized and the money transferred within 72 hours, or I walk. Richard, surprisingly, agreed. Perhaps his financial issues were more pressing than I realized. 3 days later, $175,000 appeared in my newly opened bank account, the first account truly in my name since marriage. That night, I allowed myself a small celebration, a glass of wine and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of real hope. I had seed money, a business concept people were responding to, and most importantly, freedom from Richard's legal warfare. I was done being Richard Reynolds' ex-wife. It was time to become Samantha Reynolds, founder and CEO. With settlement money in the bank, I moved quickly. I secured a small one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, invested in professional website development with James, and ordered initial inventory for Phoenix Style, my online boutique featuring curated, affordable fashion for women in transition. The launch day exceeded my modest expectations. My Instagram following, now at 15,000, converted surprisingly well. First day sales totaled just over $3,000, not exceptional by retail standards, but significant for a startup with minimal marketing budget. Press coverage followed, with 2 local fashion bloggers featuring Phoenix Style in their brands to watch segments. A small business podcast interviewed me about entrepreneurship after divorce, carefully avoiding specific mentions of Richard at my request. For 6 glorious weeks, everything seemed to be gaining momentum. Sales grew steadily, customer feedback was positive, and I was beginning to build relationships with designers and suppliers who appreciated my ethical sourcing standards. I hired a part-time assistant, Zoe, a fashion student who needed flexible hours. Then the certified letter arrived. It was from Winthrop, Caldwell and Price, Richard's attorneys. They claimed that Phoenix Style constituted intellectual property developed during our marriage, as I had conceived the original concept while we were still together. Therefore, Richard was asserting partial ownership rights to the business. I immediately called Emma. Can he do this? We signed a settlement agreement. The agreement covered known assets at the time, Emma explained, frustration evident in her voice. He's claiming this is a derivative business from intellectual property not disclosed during proceedings. That's absurd. He dismissed the idea completely when I brought it up during our marriage. Unfortunately, dismissing it doesn't mean he can't claim partial ownership of the concept. The law around marital intellectual property is complex. The cease and desist letter demanded I either shut down Phoenix Style immediately or negotiate an ownership percentage with Richard. This isn't about money for him, I realized aloud. This is about control. He can't stand that I'm succeeding without him. Almost certainly, Emma agreed. But we still have to respond legally. The options were grim: fight Richard in another protracted legal battle that would drain my settlement money, or give him a stake in the business I'd built from nothing. After sleepless nights weighing my options, I made a radical decision. I would completely pivot the business model to something that couldn't possibly be claimed as derived from my married life. Within a week, I rebranded from Phoenix Style to Rise Collective. Instead of selling curated fashion pieces, Rise would offer styling services, digital fashion guides, and eventually membership to a community of women helping each other rebuild their professional images after major life transitions. The pivot required refunding orders, rebuilding the website, and creating entirely new marketing materials. It drained nearly half of my remaining settlement money, but it freed me from Richard's legal claim on the business. The first month after the rebrand was brutal. Revenue dropped to almost nothing as I explained the change to disappointed customers. I had to let Zoe go, promising to rehire her when finances stabilized. My carefully cultivated supplier relationships became largely irrelevant under the new model. Just when Rise Collective began gaining traction again, an exciting opportunity emerged. Rebecca Taylor, a talented local designer I'd featured on my Instagram, approached me about a partnership. She created sustainable workwear for women but struggled with the business and marketing aspects. "Your rebrand story resonated with me," Rebecca explained over coffee. "I love designing, but I need a business partner who understands both fashion and rebuilding." "That's you." The partnership made perfect sense. Rebecca's designs would be exclusive to Rise Collective members, and my marketing and community building skills would expand her reach. We spent weeks drafting agreements, planning launch strategies, and creating sample collections. 3 days before our partnership announcement, Rebecca called, clearly distressed. "Samantha, I'm so sorry, but I have to back out." "What? Why? We've put so much work into this." Her voice trembled. "My primary investor is threatening to pull funding if I partner with you. He says you're involved in questionable business practices." "That's completely false." "Who is this investor?" The silence on the line told me everything before she spoke. "It's Meridian Capital Partners. I believe Richard Reynolds is one of their principals." My stomach dropped. Richard had found yet another way to sabotage me. He'd either deliberately invested in Rebecca's business to gain control, or had leveraged his connections with her existing investors. Either way, the result was the same: another opportunity destroyed. With the partnership dead, Rise Collective's cash reserves dwindled alarmingly. I was developing valuable content and building a small but loyal community, but the revenue model needed time to mature, time my finances couldn't afford. In desperation, I applied for a spot at Chicago's annual Women Entrepreneurs Pitch competition. The winner would receive $50,000 in funding and mentorship from successful business leaders. Against steep odds, I secured one of 10 presentation slots. I worked tirelessly on my pitch, practicing until I could deliver it in my sleep. I created compelling slides, gathered testimonials from my small customer base, and developed solid financial projections. This was Rise Collective's last chance. The evening of the competition arrived. Dressed in a carefully selected outfit that balanced professionalism with authenticity, and cost less than $100 total, a fact I was secretly proud of, I arrived early to set up. As I reviewed my notes in the waiting area, a familiar voice froze me in place. "Samantha." What a surprise. Richard stood before me, immaculate in a custom suit that probably cost more than my entire first inventory order. Beside him was a young woman I didn't recognize. "What are you doing here?" I managed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Meridian Capital is sponsoring the event this year. I'm one of the judges." The room spun around me. Of all the pitch competitions in Chicago, I had unknowingly applied to one connected to Richard. It couldn't be coincidence. "You should withdraw," he continued quietly. "Save yourself the embarrassment. Your numbers don't add up, your market research is superficial, and your concept is derivative." I'd hate to have to point all that out publicly. Before I could respond, the event organizer called for the judges and participants to take their places. My pitch was scheduled third. The first 2 presenters were poised, confident women with impressive businesses already showing strong revenue. When my turn came, I approached the podium with leaden feet, acutely aware of Richard's smug expression in the judges' panel. I began my presentation, explaining Rise Collective's mission to help women rebuild their professional images during major life transitions. I shared anonymous stories from community members, demonstrated our digital styling tools, and outlined our membership model. Throughout, Richard watched with calculated interest. When I reached the financial section of my presentation, he made his move. "Excuse me," he interrupted, breaking protocol. Could you explain how you're projecting 300% growth in Q3 with no significant marketing budget or venture capital? It was the first of many pointed questions aimed at undermining my presentation. With each interruption, my confidence faltered. Other judges began exchanging uncomfortable glances, but no one stopped Richard's targeted attack. By the end of my allotted time, my pitch was in shambles. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds," the lead judge said kindly. "We'll announce our decision after the remaining presentations." I returned to my seat, humiliated. The remaining pitches proceeded without similar interruptions. When the judges returned after deliberations, I already knew the outcome. "The winner of this year's Women Entrepreneurs Pitch Competition is Sustainabite," the announcer proclaimed, indicating a food waste reduction startup. As people began networking after the formal proceedings, I gathered my materials, fighting back tears. I had failed. My remaining funds would barely last another month. Richard had won again. Outside, rain poured in sheets as I walked away from the venue, not even bothering with an umbrella. My carefully selected outfit was soaked, my portfolio ruined. This felt like the lowest point yet, lower even than being locked out of my home or working retail while former friends whispered about my downfall. I was 1 block away when my phone chimed with an email notification. From Catherine.wells@auroraventures.com. Subject: Your Rise Collective Pitch. Ms. Reynolds. I was in the audience at tonight's competition. Your concept is intriguing, though your pitch suffered from obvious sabotage. I'd like to discuss possible investment. Can we meet next week? Catherine Wells. Principal, Aurora Ventures. I stood frozen in the rain, reading and rereading the message. Could this be legitimate, or another cruel trick? A quick online search confirmed Catherine Wells was indeed a respected angel investor known for backing women-led businesses. With trembling fingers, I responded affirmatively and suggested coffee the following Tuesday. Her reply came within minutes, confirming the meeting. For the first time in hours, I smiled. Perhaps this wasn't the end after all. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I refined my business plan, strengthened my financial projections, and prepared answers for every possible question. Tuesday couldn't come quickly enough. Monday evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Samantha Reynolds?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she." "This is Catherine Wells' assistant. I'm calling to cancel tomorrow's meeting." My heart sank. "May I ask why?" "Ms. Wells received some concerning information about your business practices and potential legal issues surrounding your company's founding. She's no longer interested in discussing investment opportunities." The call ended before I could respond. Within minutes, an email arrived from Catherine herself, containing a forwarded message from an anonymous source. Attached were documents suggesting I had stolen business concepts from my former husband's company, documents that appeared legitimate but were entirely fabricated. Richard had struck again. This time, he'd cut off what might have been my last lifeline. I sat on my apartment floor, back against the wall, completely defeated. The rain continued outside, matching my mood perfectly. All my efforts, all my work, all my determination, none of it seemed to matter against Richard's resources and ruthlessness. For the first time since leaving our marriage, I seriously considered giving up. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe I couldn't survive without him. Maybe I should take whatever lowly settlement he might still offer and disappear somewhere to lick my wounds. The thought lasted exactly one night. By morning, something had shifted inside me, not hope exactly, but a cold, clear resolve. If I couldn't win by playing the game on Richard's terms, perhaps it was time to change the game entirely. I woke the next morning with unusual clarity. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight filtered through my apartment windows. As I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, a realization struck me: I had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Richard's power came from his wealth and connections within Chicago's business elite. Trying to build a fashion business in that same ecosystem meant fighting on his terrain, where he controlled the high ground. Every investor, supplier, and potential partner was vulnerable to his influence. But what if I built something that didn't depend on those same networks? Something that actually turned my experience with Richard from liability into asset? I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Rise Beyond. Not a fashion company, not a styling service, but a platform specifically designed to help women achieve financial independence after setbacks, particularly those leaving financially controlling relationships. My marketing background, my first-hand experience with financial abuse, my understanding of rebuilding from nothing, these weren't weaknesses but unique qualifications. I couldn't compete with Richard in the world of high fashion or luxury retail, but he couldn't touch me in this new space. He had no credibility here. I had everything. I spent the day outlining a completely new business model, a combination of digital courses, one-on-one consulting, community forums, and eventually workshops teaching concrete skills for financial independence. The target audience wasn't fashion-forward women but survivors, women emerging from controlling relationships, career setbacks, or financial crises. That evening, I recorded my first podcast episode using my phone and a $30 microphone in my bedroom closet for better acoustics. I titled it simply, How I Lost Everything and Started Over. I spoke candidly about the financial control in my marriage, the isolation, and the challenges of rebuilding. I never mentioned Richard by name, focusing instead on the systemic issues and practical solutions I'd discovered. I uploaded the episode to a free hosting platform and shared it on my personal social media accounts, expecting perhaps a few dozen listens from sympathetic friends. By morning, it had over 3,000 plays and hundreds of comments. This is exactly what I'm going through right now. I thought I was alone in this experience. I've been divorced 3 years and still struggling with the financial aftermath. I had accidentally tapped into a massive, underserved market, women who needed practical, actionable advice on financial independence after relationship breakdowns. My second episode, Building Credit After Financial Abuse, performed even better. The third, Creating an Emergency Fund from Zero, went semi-viral when a popular women's advocate shared it. Within weeks, I was receiving hundreds of messages daily from women seeking advice. I couldn't possibly respond to them all individually, which led to my next pivot, weekly group coaching calls at an affordable price point. The first session sold out in 2 hours. I added more, which also filled quickly. A domestic violence nonprofit reached out, asking if I would conduct financial literacy workshops for their clients. Though I couldn't afford to volunteer full-time, we arranged a partial pro bono arrangement that helped their clients while providing me with a modest income. 1 month into this new direction, my inbox showed a familiar name, Catherine Wells. Subject, We should talk again. Ms. Reynolds. I owe you an apology. After canceling our meeting, I had second thoughts about the evidence I received. Upon investigation, I discovered it was fabricated. More importantly, I've been following your new venture with interest. Your podcast is addressing a critical gap in the market with authentic expertise. I'd like to discuss investment opportunities when you're ready. Catherine Wells. During our rescheduled meeting at her office, Catherine explained her abrupt cancellation. I received documents appearing to come from a reputable law firm, she said. They suggested you had misappropriated intellectual property. I should have verified before acting. That's Richard's playbook, I replied. He fabricates just enough evidence to create doubt. Catherine nodded. I realized that too late. But I'm actually glad it happened. You are? Your pivot to Rise Beyond is far more compelling than the original concept. You found your authentic voice and a mission that matters. That's what I invest in. She slid a term sheet across the table. The proposed investment would provide enough runway for a year of operations, proper equipment, and hiring 2 employees. Most importantly, she was offering expertise and connections outside Richard's sphere of influence. Why didn't you just email this? Why the elaborate test? I asked. Catherine smiled. I needed to see how you handle setbacks. Entrepreneurship is a series of crises. The best founders don't just survive them, they evolve through them. You've demonstrated that capacity repeatedly. With Catherine's investment, Rise Beyond transformed from a closet podcast to a legitimate business with genuine impact. I hired Zoe back as my first employee, handling community management and content coordination. A month later, I brought on Diane, a financial counselor with experience serving domestic violence survivors. 6 months after that disastrous pitch competition, Rise Beyond had a growing membership community, revenue-generating courses, and a waitlist for one-on-one consulting services. Our first client success story, a divorced mother of 3 who launched a successful catering business after taking our Financial Foundations course, was featured in a local business magazine. The article caught the attention of a producer at a national morning show, leading to my first television appearance discussing financial independence after divorce. The segment generated our largest single-day membership increase yet. As Rise Beyond grew, I maintained strict boundaries around my personal story. I never named Richard or shared identifying details about our marriage. My focus remained on the systemic issues and practical solutions rather than personal grievances. This approach not only protected me legally but amplified the business's credibility and reach. Richard, meanwhile, was facing his own challenges. Through Chicago's business grapevine, I heard whispers of an SEC investigation into irregular accounting at several of his development projects. His social media presence, once filled with exotic vacations and business triumphs, grew noticeably quieter. When a former acquaintance gleefully shared gossip about Richard's troubles, expecting me to celebrate, I surprised myself with my response. "I hope he gets whatever help he needs," I said simply, and changed the subject. It wasn't performative grace, I genuinely no longer cared enough to rejoice in his difficulties. My energy was fully invested in building something meaningful, not monitoring his downfall. On the first anniversary of Rise Beyond's launch, we hosted a celebration at a co-working space that had become our informal headquarters. Over 50 women attended, team members, clients, partners, and supporters who had been part of our journey. When I started this company, I told the gathered group, it was partly born from necessity and partly from spite. I wanted to prove my ex-husband wrong when he said I couldn't survive without him. Appreciative laughter rippled through the room. But something unexpected happened along the way. I discovered that true success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about becoming fully yourself and helping others do the same. I raised my glass to the room. To all of you who trusted us with your stories, who did the hard work of rebuilding, who supported our mission, you are the real success story. Rise Beyond isn't just a company, it's a community of women supporting each other through transformation. The applause was warm and genuine. Later, as I helped clean up after the event, Catherine approached me with news. "I've been talking with some colleagues at Visionary Ventures. They're interested in joining our next funding round. Valuation would be in the 7 figures." I nearly dropped the glasses I was carrying. 7 figures? Already? Catherine smiled. "You've built something rare, Samantha, a business with both financial potential and meaningful impact. That combination attracts smart money." As I walked home that evening, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 years. From trophy wife to homeless, from retail clerk to founder and CEO. Each obstacle Richard had placed in my path had ultimately forced me to find a better direction. His attempts to destroy me had instead stripped away everything that wasn't authentically mine, revealing the resilience and creativity I hadn't known I possessed. For the first time since our separation, I felt genuine gratitude toward Richard. Not for his cruelty or manipulation, but for inadvertently setting me free to discover my true capabilities. The woman who had once measured her worth through his approval now led a company valued in the millions, helping other women find their own power. It wasn't spite or revenge that fueled me anymore. It was purpose, and that was a foundation Richard could never undermine. 2 years after the launch of Rise Beyond, our team had grown to 15 full-time employees, all women with their own stories of rebuilding after setbacks. Our headquarters occupied the entire top floor of the co-working space where we'd celebrated our first anniversary, a space now officially named the Rise Building after we became anchor tenants. The Rise Beyond Foundation, our nonprofit arm, had distributed over $250,000 in grants to women leaving financially abusive situations, funded by a percentage of our business revenue and matching donations from corporate partners. Our podcast now featured in the top 100 business charts, with over 2 million downloads. My personal profile had risen alongside the company's. I'd appeared on several national television programs as an expert on financial independence and entrepreneurship after setbacks. A major publishing house had offered a book deal for my story and business advice, with an advance substantial enough to establish a secure personal financial foundation for the first time since my divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now moved in some of the same exclusive social circles I'd frequented during my marriage to Richard, but this time on my own terms, based on my own accomplishments. Former friends who had ghosted me during the divorce now sent LinkedIn connection requests and coffee invitations. I accepted some, declined others, always maintaining the clear boundaries that had become my post-divorce signature. Our expansion into international markets began almost accidentally. A British journalist interviewed me for a feature in a London-based women's magazine, resulting in a flood of membership requests from the UK. Similar patterns followed in Australia, Canada, and parts of Europe. We hired our first international team members and began creating location-specific resources for women navigating different legal and financial systems. The real test of my personal growth came unexpectedly at the annual Chicago Women in Business Awards Gala. I had been nominated in the Entrepreneur of the Year category, an honor that still felt somewhat surreal. As I circulated during the pre-ceremony reception, a familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter. "Samantha. You look well." Richard stood before me, still handsome in his tailored suit, though I noticed subtle signs of aging that hadn't been there during our marriage, deeper lines around his eyes, a slight softening along his jawline. More striking was his diminished aura. The commanding presence that had once dominated rooms seemed muted, contained. "Thank you, Richard. So do you." My voice remained steady, my pulse surprisingly normal. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Meridian Capital is a sponsor," he replied, gesturing vaguely toward a banner. "Plus, I'm representing Reynolds Development in Jason Winter's absence." I nodded, noticing Robert Winter's absence with private amusement. The affair with Jessica had apparently run its course, as I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Robert and Jessica had reconciled after a public and messy separation. "I've been following your success," Richard continued, his tone difficult to read. "Rise Beyond is making quite an impact." "Yes, we are. I always knew you had potential," he said, with the same proprietary tone he'd used during our marriage when claiming credit for my accomplishments. "You just needed the right motivation." The old me would have bristled at his attempted appropriation of my success. The new me simply smiled. "No, Richard. I always had potential that threatened you. There's a difference." I excused myself before he could respond, rejoining my team members who had attended in support. From across the room, I caught Catherine's approving nod. She had witnessed the exchange. The company's growth accelerated throughout our third year. Our membership community expanded to over 50,000 women globally. Our digital courses generated consistent revenue, while our consulting services maintained a perpetual waitlist despite adding new counselors quarterly. When Catherine arranged a meeting with partners from Visionary Ventures, I assumed it was to discuss expansion funding. Instead, they presented an acquisition offer. 8 figures, Samantha, Catherine explained, sliding the term sheet across the conference table. "With guarantees for you to remain as CEO for at least 3 years, and protection for the foundation's work." The number on the paper made my breath catch. It was more money than I had ever imagined possessing, even during my marriage to Richard. "I need time to consider this," I managed, though my mind was already racing through possibilities. "Of course," Catherine replied. "But they'll want an answer within 2 weeks. An opportunity like this doesn't come along often." That evening, I sat in my office alone after everyone had left, the acquisition offer still on my desk. Through the window, Chicago's skyline glittered in the dusk. Somewhere among those lights was the penthouse I had once shared with Richard, a space that had felt both privileged and confining. My phone chimed with an email notification. The sender's name made me pause, Richard Reynolds. Subject, meeting request. Samantha. Congratulations on your company's success and your well-deserved recognition at the awards gala. I'd like to meet privately to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Coffee perhaps, at your convenience. Richard. 3 years ago, this message would have thrown me into emotional turmoil. Today, it barely registered as important. After brief consideration, I decided there was no harm in hearing what he had to say. I suggested a coffee shop near my office for the following afternoon. Richard arrived precisely on time, as always. He ordered black coffee. Still avoiding sugar, I noted absently. I chose a cinnamon latte, a small indulgence I'd denied myself during our marriage after he once commented about calories. Thank you for meeting, he began after we were seated. I've been following Rise Beyond's growth with interest. So you mentioned at the gala. Why the sudden interest, Richard? He studied his coffee cup for a moment before meeting my gaze. I made a mistake with you, Samantha. I underestimated you. The half-hearted apology hung between us. I waited for him to continue. I've been doing some reflection lately. My business has faced challenges. Some relationships haven't worked out as expected. He cleared his throat. Seeing what you've built from nothing has been illuminating. Richard, what is this really about? He straightened, his businessman persona reasserting itself. I'm considering diversifying my investment portfolio. Rise Beyond represents an opportunity in a market segment I previously overlooked. I'd be interested in discussing potential involvement. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me. You want to invest in Rise Beyond? The company you tried repeatedly to destroy? Business is business, Samantha. The past is the past. I studied him, trying to discern his true motivation. Was this a genuine olive branch? Another control tactic? Or simply a calculated business move from a man whose own ventures were rumored to be struggling? Ultimately, his motivation didn't matter. What mattered was my response, and the realization that his opinion, his approval, his involvement meant absolutely nothing to me anymore. I appreciate the interest, Richard, but we're fully capitalized at present. I stood, gathering my bag. I wish you well with your reflection process. Truly. His surprise at my brevity was evident. That's it? After everything? Yes, that's it. There's nothing else to say. As I walked him out of the coffee shop, I felt a profound sense of closure. This man who had once been the center of my universe, whose approval I had desperately sought, whose rejection had devastated me, he was now just another person I had once known, no more significant than any former acquaintance. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting to discuss the acquisition offer. After presenting the terms to my leadership team, I opened the floor for discussion. It's an incredible validation of what we've built, Zoe noted. But would our mission change under corporate ownership? The foundation work is protected in the terms, Diane added, but what about our membership community? They trust us precisely because we're independent. The discussion continued thoughtfully, weighing financial security against mission integrity. Finally, Madison, who had joined the company as Chief Operating Officer the previous year, asked the critical question. Samantha, what do you want? This is your vision, your company. In your gut, what feels right? I looked around the room at the team we'd built, diverse, committed women who had each found their own power through helping others find theirs. I want to take the company public, I replied, surprising even myself with the clarity of the decision. Not now, but within the next 18 months. We'd maintain control, expand our reach, and create even more impact. The energy in the room shifted palpably. By meeting's end, we had the framework of a counter-proposal that would bring in Visionary Ventures as minority investors in preparation for an eventual IPO. That evening, we hosted a special event for Rise Beyond members, a celebration of client success stories. Women from across the country shared how they had rebuilt their lives after divorce, job loss, health crises, and other setbacks. Some had launched businesses, others had returned to education or changed careers. All had found financial independence and personal agency with support from our community. As I listened to their stories, I felt a deep sense of alignment. This wasn't just a successful business, it was a movement with purpose, one that transformed pain into power not just for me, but for thousands of others. The path forward was clear, not selling to the highest bidder, but building something enduring that would outlast any individual, including me. Catherine called the next morning after receiving our counterproposal. An IPO track. Bold move. The right move, I replied. For the company and our mission. I agree. And so do my colleagues at Visionary. We're in for the minority stake with pre-IPO positioning. They love the foundation angle, excellent ESG metrics for their portfolio. With the deal signed, Rise Beyond entered a new phase of accelerated growth. We expanded our team, enhanced our technology platform, and formalized our governance structures in preparation for public company status. The night before we filed our initial SEC paperwork, I received another email from Richard. Subject: Congratulations in advance. Samantha. Word travels fast in financial circles. I understand Rise Beyond is preparing for an IPO. Congratulations on building a company worthy of the public markets. Perhaps we could discuss. I deleted the message without reading further. Whatever Richard wanted, validation, connection, investment opportunity, it held no interest for me. My focus was entirely on the future of Rise Beyond and the women we served. The IPO filing made headlines in both business and women's media. From divorce to IPO, how Samantha Reynolds built a multi-million-dollar empire from zero read one particularly satisfying headline. Interview requests flooded in, along with partnership opportunities and speaking invitations. Through it all, I maintained the same clear-eyed focus that had emerged from my lowest moments. Success wasn't measured by wealth or public recognition, though both had arrived in abundance. True wealth was freedom, the freedom to choose my own path, to live according to my own values, and to help others find that same liberation. On IPO day, surrounded by my team at the stock exchange, I felt a surreal sense of completion. As I rang the ceremonial bell, I thought of that rainy night after the failed pitch competition, when I'd walked home defeated and drenched, certain I had lost everything. How could I have known then that losing everything would ultimately give me everything that mattered? The stock opened at twice its offering price and kept climbing throughout the day. By closing bell, Rise Beyond was officially valued at over $100 million, making my ownership stake worth more than Richard had ever offered in our divorce settlement. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me, though it no longer held the emotional charge it once might have. How does it feel to be officially wealthy on your own terms? A CNBC reporter asked as we left the exchange. I considered the question carefully. Wealth means something different to me now than it once did. True wealth is freedom, purpose, and community. The financial aspect is simply a tool for expanding our impact. That evening, our team celebrated at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. Champagne flowed, speeches were given, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement for the future. As the party continued, I stepped onto the terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. Madison joined me, handing me a fresh glass of champagne. Remember when you showed up at my guest room door with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go? I do. You saved me that night. She shook her head. No, you saved yourself. I just provided a temporary landing spot. She clinked her glass against mine. To the woman who built an empire from nothing. Not nothing, I corrected her. From everything that matters. Resilience, determination, and the support of true friends. As we rejoined the celebration, I felt profound gratitude for the journey, not despite its hardships, but because of them. Each obstacle Richard had placed in my path had forced me to find strength I never knew I possessed. His attempt to destroy me had instead revealed my true capacity for creation. The empire I had built wasn't made of real estate or luxury goods. It was built of impact, of women helping women, of transformation and growth. And unlike the hollow wealth I had briefly possessed as Richard's wife, this was an empire with meaning, one that would continue growing and serving long after today's celebration ended. The morning after our IPO celebration, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The quiet before everyone arrived gave me space to absorb the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. My office walls, once bare in our startup days, now displayed framed magazine covers featuring Rise Beyond, awards recognizing our impact, and, my favorite, a collage of handwritten thank you notes from women we'd helped. When my assistant mentioned Richard was in the lobby requesting a few minutes of my time, I was surprised but not unsettled. After brief consideration, I agreed to see him. "Congratulations, Samantha," he said as he entered, taking in my corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "You've done remarkably well." "Thank you, Richard. What can I do for you today?" He settled into the chair opposite my desk, looking slightly uncomfortable, an unusual state for the always composed Richard Reynolds. "I wanted to offer my congratulations in person. The IPO was impressive." I waited, knowing there must be more. "I also wanted to acknowledge," he continued with visible effort, "that I was wrong about you. About what you could accomplish without me." It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology for years of manipulation and sabotage, but it was likely the closest Richard could come to genuine reflection. "I appreciate that acknowledgement," I replied simply. An awkward silence stretched between us until Richard cleared his throat. "There's also a business matter. Reynolds Development is launching a foundation focused on affordable housing. Given Rise Beyond's success in the nonprofit sector, I thought there might be potential for collaboration." I studied him, trying to discern genuine intent from opportunism. His business had indeed faced challenges, nothing catastrophic, but enough to tarnish his once sterling reputation. Association with Rise Beyond's positive brand could offer valuable rehabilitation. "I'll have my foundation director review any proposal you submit," I said diplomatically. "But Richard, I hope you understand that any partnership would require genuine alignment with our values, transparency, empowerment, and integrity." He nodded, understanding the subtle message. Our conversation remained brief and professional. As I walked him to the elevator, I realized I genuinely wished him healing and growth, not because I cared about him personally anymore, but because I believed everyone deserved the opportunity to evolve beyond their worst behaviors. "Goodbye, Richard," I said as the elevator doors opened. "I wish you well." As he stepped inside, he turned back with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've built something remarkable, Samantha. Something I never could have." The doors closed before I could respond, but his words stayed with me. Not because I needed his validation, that dependency had dissolved long ago, but because they represented the final closing of a chapter in my life. Richard Reynolds, once the center of my universe, was now just a person from my past. His opinion, his approval, his very existence no longer factored into my sense of self-worth or happiness. That complete emotional independence was perhaps my greatest achievement. The IPO success brought both opportunities and challenges. Overnight, Rise Beyond transformed from scrappy startup to public company with shareholder expectations and quarterly reporting requirements. Our mission remained the same, but our operational reality grew considerably more complex. We expanded thoughtfully, maintaining our core focus on women's financial independence while extending our reach globally. The Rise Beyond Foundation increased its grant program five-fold, supporting women not just in leaving financially controlling situations but in building sustainable futures afterward. 6 months post-IPO, I stood on stage at our largest event yet, the inaugural Rise Beyond Global Summit. Over 1,000 women from 27 countries had gathered in Chicago for 3 days of workshops, networking, and celebration. Looking out at the sea of faces, women of all ages, backgrounds, and experiences united by their determination to build lives on their own terms, I felt a surge of emotion unlike anything in my professional life thus far. When I started Rise Beyond, it was born from personal crisis. My wealthy husband had said I couldn't survive without him, and I was determined to prove him wrong. Appreciative laughter rippled through the audience. But what began as defiance evolved into something far more meaningful. I discovered that true empowerment isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. About recognizing your inherent capabilities and building from there. I shared the key lessons from my journey, distilled now through years of reflection and growth. First, financial independence is the foundation of all freedom. Without control over your own resources, every other choice becomes constrained. This isn't about wealth, it's about agency. Second, authentic relationships sustain us through crisis in ways superficial connections never can. One true friend who believes in you is worth more than 100 fair-weather acquaintances. Third, vulnerability becomes strength when shared purposefully. By opening up about my struggles, I found not just healing but connection with thousands of women facing similar challenges. Fourth, true success multiplies when shared. Each woman who rebuilds her life with our support goes on to help others do the same, creating a ripple effect of empowerment. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, success is not measured by bank accounts or status symbols, but by impact and purpose. Real wealth is the freedom to live authentically and contribute meaningfully. As I concluded my address, I introduced a young woman named Emily to the stage. The newest recipient of our foundation's entrepreneurship grant. Emily had left an abusive marriage with nothing but her children and a dream of starting a mobile bookkeeping service for small businesses. With our support, she had not only launched her company but was now employing 3 other women from similar backgrounds. Watching Emily share her story with confidence and pride, I felt the beautiful symmetry of our work. My personal crisis had created a platform that now enabled countless other women to transform their own crises into opportunity and growth. After the summit concluded, I took a rare full week off, spending time at a small lake house I'd purchased in Michigan, a personal retreat far different from the lavish vacation properties Richard and I had owned. Simple, peaceful, and entirely mine. Sitting on the dock one evening, watching the sunset over still waters, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from dependent wife to independent founder. The path had been neither straight nor easy, with moments of devastating loss and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Yet each setback had ultimately redirected me toward a more authentic and purposeful life than I could have imagined during my married years. Richard had been right about one thing: I couldn't have survived without him, in the sense that the woman I was then, the trophy wife dependent on his approval and resources, had needed to die for the real Samantha to emerge. That dependent woman hadn't survived, she had transformed into someone far stronger, wiser, and more impactful. The empire I had built wasn't one of real estate developments or luxury brands. It was an empire of impact, women supporting women, knowledge freely shared, resources strategically directed toward creating independence rather than dependence. As I returned to work the following week, I found an email from a woman I'd been mentoring, a former corporate executive rebuilding after a devastating divorce similar to my own. "I had my first client meeting today," she wrote. "Before walking in, I heard your voice in my head: your worth isn't determined by one person's failure to value you. I closed the deal. Thank you for showing me what's possible when we refuse to accept others' limitations." This, I realized, was the true meaning of success, not the wealth, recognition, or status that had once seemed so important, but the power to help others recognize and claim their own potential. Have you ever had to completely reinvent yourself after a major setback? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and transformation in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this message today. Remember, sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most authentic purpose. Thank you for being part of this community, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you all.